Welcome to Third Floor Views, a production of Chesapeake Family Life, where we talk about health, education, and living with kids. I'm your host, Laura Boycourt. Today, we're discussing the latest titles, trends, and themes in children's literature. And joining us is children's literary consultant Kit Ballenger. And some listeners or viewers may know her from the Absolutely Mindy show on Sirius XM, where she reviews kids' books. That's how my children and I got to know her. So I'm so pleased to welcome you to the podcast today.
Thank you so much, Laura. I'm excited to talk with you.
Absolutely. So let's get into it. First of all, could you tell us a little bit about your background and about what Help Your Shelf is?
Sure. So I am a children's librarian. I have a Master of Library and Information Science. Help Your Shelf is a consulting business that I created a couple of years ago to work as sort of an umbrella, connecting lots of different projects that I had going with a handful of different organizations. I worked for a nonprofit for a number of years, coordinating school visits at Title I schools for authors and illustrators. And when I left there, I knew that I wanted to continue connecting with a number of important organizations in my community. Who were providing services for kids and families who may not have disposable income to be spending on books. So book access is really important to me. So by creating Help Your Shelf, I've been able to work with a number of larger clients, a handful of media organizations, like you mentioned, Sirius XM, Kids Place Live, and Tinkercast, but also groups like National PTA, Parent Teachers, and some local garden-based nonprofits and some publishers here and there through my past. And by working with them, I'm also able to support some work with local organizations here in the Metro DMV area who are providing books and educational services to kids. So it's a nice synergy.
Fantastic. And it sounds like, given all that background and your experience, you really know your books. So,
it's funny. I know recent books.
Yeah.
And I actually had somebody reach out to me this morning and ask me a question about a classic, like recommending A Christmas Carol to their child or something. And I said, I'm so sorry. You definitely have to ask somebody else. I read 40,000 pages a year of new release children's books. So birth to 21, I'm pretty good. I can help you if you want to ask me about a recent, bestseller for a grown-up. I'm pretty useless.
So you've got your fingers on the pulse of sort of what's popular today, what kids are reading. So let's get into that. What are you finding that young readers, and again, we're looking at the the board books through the young adult, ready to leave the nest kids. What are they interested in these days?
Laura, I still have to say it's graphic novels, more graphic novels. Maybe you branch out every once in a while and you're adding an illustrated novel to the mix. So that's more like a Dork Diaries or a Diary of a Wimpy Kid, where as you're flipping the pages, you see there are illustrations on the pages, but they're not full art text. So graphic novels are so popular, and I'm just constantly surprised how often I have to defend those to parents still. In terms of trends,
your defense? Yeah, can I interrupt
they're
you?
They're real books. They're
I love them. My older daughter loves them. But what would you say in defense of them to those skeptics, maybe?
Absolutely, reading a graphic novel, reading a Diary of a Wimpy Kid, reading a Captain Underpants. That is reading. In the same way, audiobooks, that is reading. You are triggering the same parts of your brain with an audiobook that you would be reading a text on a page. When you're reading graphic novels, you're reading a little bit differently. You have a visual literacy element there that you are building. There's a different way of telling a story, and it's stretching different parts of your brain. For some kids, they need the visual aspects of that to help support the way that they're sort of decoding, understanding the text. I'm not a reading specialist, so I'm going to try and stay with like librarian terminology here and parent terminology here. But for many of us, it helps us to have these visual cues. It's also a terrific way of building out a child's emotional literacy, to be able to see expressions paired with phrasing there, to understand when someone is angry and has a really wrinkled brow, or when someone is sad. And the visual manifestation of that through a graphic novel can sometimes be like that extra little clue or help that kids need when they're building their own understanding of self and emotional states and relationships with peers. So I could go on all day long. I love graphic novels. The number of times that I have recommended, Dave Pilkey gave a lecture at the Library of Congress in 2019, and I recommend it all the time to parents for understanding what a gift he is to children's literature. And, super diaper baby all day.
Yes.
I'm here for it.
We love it too. And that was a fantastic A+ defense. And it makes so much sense. And I never thought about that, taking the cues from the emotions, from the visual emotions. And that makes so much sense. So I'm really glad you brought that up. And I apologize for interrupting. So what else are you seeing? The graphic novels, which you've successfully defended. Anything else that's ranking up there for kids these days?
It's funny, Laura, that I feel like there are sort of themes where books sort of come in clusters. Like I would say 2 years ago and into last year, it felt like every picture book I picked up had a bear, just bears everywhere. And I standing in for a lot of children in stories, a lot of bears. I saw a lot of tree books this year, a range of fiction and nonfiction. I think the concept of the wood wide web and that sort of interconnected communication system of trees and mushrooms and fungi and such, that has made its way down to picture books. So we're seeing some beautiful work with trees, a lot of wonderful picture book biographies. And that goes not just for our younger readers, but picture books for older readers in particular, some biographies that are bringing to light stories that have been underrepresented historically. And oftentimes doing that in a way that the text has back matter in it, like citations and sources and additional recommended reading material, in a way that makes a book really terrific for use in 4th, 5th, 6th grade, even high schoolers. I'm recommending picture books for high schoolers all the time right now. And I love what I'm seeing in nonfiction graphic novels as well. Graphic memoirs in particular, but really the picture book biographies I think have been terrific. Another thing I would say I'm seeing more of, talking a little bit about that emotional literacy, I'm seeing more stories that are really honoring the range of emotions that our kids experience. I'm seeing less of the like, oh, buck up, little camper kind of stories, and more stories like I pulled this one out. Jenny May is sad, and this just honors the fact that that is a real emotion, and we don't know exactly why she's sad, but we see modeled here how to be a good friend for somebody who is feeling big emotions. And I love some of the social emotional learning that I'm seeing.
And that's huge right now in the schools. As a teacher, that's something that's really, taking up a lot of well-deserved attention. And that's great that it's not being brushed under the rug, that you can tackle this, identify it, work with it, tackle it. So that's great to hear.
I brought another stat. Can I just keep going on this? Like themes that I'm seeing.
This is exactly
one thing that I would say that I love that I'm seeing, and I'm really especially grateful for, is an increase in picture books in particular lately, also some middle grade, about mobility, discussing bodies and the way bodies move. And this one in particular by James Catchpole is, this is actually from the United Kingdom, but it's going to get republished in the United States this year by a US publisher, called What Happened to You, which I love, but also stories where there's just incidental representation of mobility assistance. This one, Logan's Greenhouse, I think does a wonderful job. And then books like Roll, Ride, Run and Bodies Are Cool, where we're just seeing all sorts of different bodies and movement and ability. And I love how we're kind of beginning to focus a little bit more on ableism as a sort of default in children's picture books, and trying to kind of deconstruct that moving forward. So that's a trend I'm really excited about as we're looking into the new year.
Well, that's wonderful. And just on the subject of representation and seeing, having readers see themselves in their literature, can you tell us a little bit about Pride and Less Prejudice, what that's about?
Yeah, I'd love to. Thank you for asking. Pride and Less Prejudice is a nonprofit. It's quite young, it's just a couple of years old. And the idea is that Pride and Less Prejudice sends LGBTQIA+ books to pre-K through 3rd grade classrooms and educators across the United States and Canada. So every year we select a collection, like a sort of capsule collection of picture books. This year, I think it's 17 or so. So it's around 15 to 17 books a year. And we combine those in little bundles. And when educators, so classroom teachers, librarians, sometimes a school resource teacher, when they reach out to Pride and Less Prejudice and request books from us, they do that for free. And for free, we send them a selection of books. And the idea is that they're able to bring those books into the classroom, incorporate them into the conversation, have them available on the bookshelves, so that kids who are in those classes can see themselves represented in stories, see their families and their family structures represented in stories, and also just to sort of demystify some of the conversations and vocabulary, vernacular around LGBTQIA kids and families.
Oh, that's wonderful. And that's so important to, as you said, see themselves, but then see their families and to answer some of those questions and take the sort of the mystery out of it in a kid-friendly and approachable way,
Yeah,
I
you
would
see
imagine.
your friends, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Wonderful. Well, I think you're excited about this part. Show and tell. I would love, or just tell for the listeners, I would love to see/hear about some of the favorite books that you're really excited about right now. Anything that
Yes.
you've got and would like
Yes.
to
Do you have like 6
explain?
hours? I could go
Yes.
on so long about this because I jumped the,
Yeah.
I'm afraid I jumped the starting line on that one and came in strong with a handful of other,
No,
other
that's
things that I
fine.
was showing you. I'm going to just head on it. I've done a handful of picture books so far, but I just wanted to share Two Small Tola and the Three Fine Girls. This is the second book in a series, but they stand alone. Tola is small but mighty, and this is by Atanuke. This is an illustrated beginning chapter book. It has 3 little vignettes in it with illustrations throughout, and I just love. She is a sibling. She's a youngest child, lives with her grandmother, and is always just up to something, but in the most wholesome and wonderful way. And we really learn a lot from the experiences that she has. This is a new series from Corey Tabor, who everything that that Corey Tabor writes, I just end up cracking up about. Mel Fell and Snail Crossing were 2 really terrific picture books last year. But this is Sir Ladybug, and it is a friendship story and a beginner's graphic novel. You see the graphic format there with the panels. And it's just funny and very, very approachable. And again, a story that you can pick up and read any one of them in the series at any point in time. I know you were really excited about
Yes.
this one.
Yes. And just for anyone curious about the backstory, I was listening to Kit this morning on the Absolutely Mindy show recommend this book, and I messaged her and I said, can you please bring this one on for our podcast? So yes, tell us about Killer Underwear Invasion.
Yes, this is Killer Underwear Invasion with the exclamation mark, how to spot fake news, disinformation, and conspiracy theories, by Elise Gravel. And Elise Gravel is a cartoonist, and she has done a fabulous series about disgusting critters. If you know people who like really creative nonfiction, she did a funny series that's like lice and cockroaches, and
there you go.
It's really disgusting, factually accurate, and wonderful graphic novels. But this truly is a breakdown on fake news, and it is funny. It is full of facts. It uses some pretty hilarious examples of things about disinformation and why people create disinformation, why we're so drawn in by it when we see clickbait on social media. And this for me is a book that I think the librarians who I know are using this now, incorporating it into classroom instruction on fake news and understanding reliable sources. But the parents I know who have read it think it's a terrific conversation starter for kids that are just beginning to dip their toes into social media use. So, your 8-year-old, your 9-year-old, your 10-year-old, whether these kids have phones or not yet, they are exposed to a lot of incidental news. And this is just a great way of kind of breaking down what's real, what isn't real, what's true, who is a reliable resource. So I recommend this one. It's also just really funny, just genuinely funny.
That's perfect.
This was one of my favorite quieter stories of the year. It's called Wild Oak by Cece Harrington. And she is actually a Maryland author. So I brought
Yay,
this one
Marilyn.
today.
Perfect.
Yay!
Thank
She's up in the
you.
Annapolis area. Yeah. It is an alternating story. It's historical fiction about a child named Maggie who has a stammer, and it is set in a coastal region of England. And bear with me, it alternates between Maggie and a snow leopard who has, through a series of unfortunate events, ended up being released in the forest near where Maggie's grandfather lives. This is an environmental story, so it's really about environmental advocacy and self-advocacy and confidence. The language in it is really just lovely. And this, to me, is the kind of story that you could read aloud and share as a family, and it would bridge a really wide range of age listeners too. So the kind of thing where if you've got a couple of siblings or kids together in a room, I think this would hold everybody's attention, and it's just beautifully written.
I love the cover art as well. That's really nice.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It has a handful of spot illustrations in there. So I mentioned graphic novels. This is one of my favorites of the year, a nonfiction graphic novel for upper middle grade or young adults called Victory Stand, Raising My Fist for Justice. This is the memoir of Tommie Smith, who was an Olympian in the 1968 Olympics, who won many set world records and won a medal and had it revoked by the Olympic Committee after raising his fist in protest to the treatment of African Americans. So it is illustrated, it's written also with Derek Barnes, who's an award-winning author, and illustrated by Dawood Anyabwile, and it is excellent.
That looks fantastic.
And one of my favorite graphic novels for middle grade kids this year is called My Aunt is a Monster by Ramina Yee. And the aunt is really a monster. I'll hold it close to the camera.
It's true. Okay.
And the niece who ends up moving in with her is blind, and so doesn't realize that her aunt is a monster. And they go on some fabulous adventures together. It is an excellent story, and I'm really, really hoping a sequel for that will be coming soon. And then just to wrap this up, I did bring a couple books for teens, if that's okay.
Perfect. Of course.
These are 3 YA young adult debuts. In this case, it's not actually his debut book, but it's the first one that he's written for teens. It's called Promise Boys by Nick Brooks, and it comes out next month. Nick grew up in Washington, D.C. and was a teacher in D.C. And this is a murder mystery set in all boys D.C. charter school. Really just gripping, high interest, alternating perspectives. So a ton of mystery and intrigue there. We Deserve Monuments by Jazz Hammond, which if you do follow me on Instagram, you have probably seen that I have been talking about absolutely nonstop. A girl from the DMV moves down to Georgia to help care for an ailing grandmother. It's really beautifully written. And this last one, I can't stop talking about. It is called The Life and Crimes of Hoodie Rosen by Isaac Bloom, and also great for like 12 plus on that one or so upper middle grade into YA. And that was my attempt at being discreet.
That was it. You limited yourself very well. I know you could do this for hours, so thank you for the ones that you did show us. They sound like some great topics and some great things to take a look into. Last question, as somebody who is surrounded by books and who's so literacy driven, what are some things that you could recommend for teachers, librarians, parents to do to foster that love of reading in kids of all ages? Just some sort of simple tips, just choices that caregivers or teachers could make.
Thank you for asking that question, because it's something I feel really strongly about, and that is the easy answer for me is choice reading. Letting kids read what they want, and understanding that reading can have just such a more expansive definition than simply a bound book. It could be the back of a cereal box. It could be the sports scores. It could be the manual for your new video game system. There are so many ways of connecting and engaging with text. And as I said earlier, it can be audiobooks. Audiobooks are phenomenal. Listening to podcasts can also accomplish a lot of the same things, but letting kids choose what they want to read and understanding that what you loved reading in your youth
Mhm.
may not be what your kids connect with, and you may have to sort of let that go. I think that's a really, really important thing. And I can't, as I said, I'm not a reading specialist. I'm a librarian. So I'm in no position to be telling teachers what to do. And I'm very, very grateful for all the work that they're doing to bring
Mhm.
books into the classroom. But I'm not a big fan of reading logs, and have seen in my experience that kids who are having to track minutes tend to be a
Mhm.
little bit more begrudging about the time that they're spending reading. And if you have the option of telling kids, read something that you really enjoyed and maybe just tell me about it, report that out in the classroom or, one-on-one, I think that can
Mhm.
go a really
Mhm.
long way towards fostering a love of reading that lasts a child's whole life. And the idea there that if you get to read what brings you joy, then you will continue reading, I think is just an important one to keep in mind.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, thank you for so much for sharing your expertise and your recommendations. And hopefully, some listeners and viewers have some great Christmas stocking stuffer gift ideas now. Those were some wonderful titles. So, thanks so much to Kit Ballenger for being here to talk about all things Kidlit and just my personal recommendation, please follow her, Kid Unlit on Instagram. It is just packed with the best pictures, the best recommendations, the best sort of suggestions. So definitely give her a follow for all
Thank
of her
you.
recommendations. You're welcome. And thank you to all of our viewers and listeners as well. Make sure that you visit ChesapeakeFamily.com for up-to-date local information on home, health, and living for today's Maryland parent. This episode will be archived on ChesapeakeFamily.com in video and podcast format. I'm Laura Boycourt with Chesapeake Family Life and Third Four Views. Thank you so much for joining us today. Bye-bye.